Good afternoon. We are working with and working on energizing and strengthening our intentions to act in wholesome manners. We say these 10 guidelines at the end of our opening. We vow to be wholesome, to energize our intent, our intention. So today we're going to practice. First of all, we're going to discern, we're going to discover what it is that we need to flip, what it is that we need to convert from unwholesome to wholesome. Because if we don't know what to work on, then we're always going to be working on something that isn't as beneficial as our stumbling block. Remember, we talked about Paul in Romans, who felt so wretched because he did what he didn't want to do and he didn't do what he wanted to do. So the first thing we have to discover within our own selves is what is it that we do that we don't want to do? And then what are the exercises that converts that, if you will, into something that's wholesome? So these are the exercises that we want to work on. Dote, the neurosurgeon who also leads the clinic for compassion and heartfulness, says that there was a study done that indicated that the average person is unmindful 80% of their time, 80% of their reality. And so the first thing I want you to do is to step into that space of mindfulness right now. Done? Okay, who does not know how to be mindful? Who does not know when they are mindful? All right, so what are two very easy examples of being mindful? One is being present in the moment, in the here and now. Well, that's easy to say. What does that mean? What does that express in my body being? So, there are exercises or there are realities expressed that let us know when we are mindful, when we are present in the moment. There is feeling as an easy one. There is, whether it's using the body form, that is feeling the weight of your presence on the cushion. So the body is always in the present moment. So it's not just feeling anything, because anything may or may not be present in the present moment. But it's feeling the body. The body is always present, is always here right now. So you can feel your glutes on the chair, on the cushion. If you can feel that, if you are present with that feeling, then you know you're also mindfully present in the moment. There is another concept which can be utilized, and that's breath. But it also has to do with feeling. It's about feeling the breath. It's not just about unconsciously knowing that you're breathing, because you're alive and you're present to some degree. It's actually feeling the breath as it enters and leaves the body. And you can feel that at the nostrils, if you can, the upper lip, or the rise and fall of the abdomen. There are some meditation schools that use this as an indicator of feeling of breath. So it's up to you, whichever works easiest for you. Whichever you can stick with and stay with, because you do not want to be one of those people who are unmindful, unheedful 80% of your day. Because this is how we get seduced by by the illusions and the delusions of life and reality. This is how we get fooled. So, now is everyone present? Yes? Okay. We're going to, or can you get some paper, please? Something for, enough for everyone to have one sheet of paper. What we're going to do is to just close our eyes and go inside with consciousness. Have a relationship with consciousness, with mind. And see what the content of consciousness is. Now, the 7 factors of awakening, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the first expression of, the first factor is mindfulness, is being present. The second factor of enlightenment is investigation of states. So what we're going to do today is to investigate the states of mind contained in citta, contained in consciousness. That's all we're doing. It's not about finding them and trying to push them out. It's not about finding them and trying to embrace them and welcome them. It's about finding them and just observing that they are present, and also observing that without any intention, without any involvement from us, they go away. That's what thoughts do. They come and they go, all by themselves. They have nothing to do with us, except being in our presence. And it is for each and every one of us to identify the quality of that thought, whether it's greedy or angry or delusional or cruel or whatever it might be. And it's all about you. It's not a test, it's a process. In other words, if you think it's a greedy thought, then for you it's a greedy thought, because that is what has driven you and guided you in past days and past weeks and past years as to how you respond to the moment that you identify with a thought that has a present relation with you. If you think it's greedy, then you will respond greedily. If you think it's anger, then you will respond angrily. So the first thing we have to do is to find out what it is that we carry around with us, that is there as an influence to whether we are successful in our intentions or not. What makes them work and what makes them not work. The secret, the magic, is habit. We talk about things like neuroplasticity. We throw that around, and everyone understands what that involves, but again, like mindfulness, how do I know how to truly touch it? How do I know how to truly turn on the machine of neuroplasticity? So to bring it back down into everyday layman language, it's about habit. How do I develop a habit? Well, whether it's a good habit or a bad habit, there's only one way to develop it, and that's to do it over and over again. So this is how I initiate neuroplasticity, by initiating habit, by doing what I think is a quality thing, a wholesome thing, over and over and over and over again. I refrain from using the words skillful and unskillful or good and bad, because a good habit a good habit can be also a bad habit. It just means that I'm more skillful at doing this than I'm at doing something else. But the reason that I get more skillful at it is because I do it more often. And so I can be as skillful or as good as being angry as I am as being loving. It depends upon which action, which intention I choose to employ more often than the other. And there comes a place or a crossing, if you will, between the two, where I begin to find myself acting more wholesomely more often than I do the unwholesome state of mind, the unwholesome action. But the first thing that we have to do is to determine what's present there so we can negate it. It goes away, or I erode it through negation. What am I talking about? If I pray, if I intend, operate more from a wholesome state than an unwholesome state, but I voice or word my intention like this: I don't want to be bad anymore. Well, that sounds like a legitimate intention. But what I am using and what I am presenting to consciousness is bad, as opposed to I want to be, or I am being good from this point on. Because even when I dictate to consciousness that I want to be good, that indicates that I'm not. Understand? So it is that subtle in the practice. It is that subtle in the practice. So this is an indication of why it is seemingly hard to be successful at transition. You know, changing from the old person I am and don't want to be anymore to the new person I want to be and want to sustain that forever in my life. As long as we continue to erode the wishes by using negative words, we're just going to kind of flip and flop around in the same space. So, as another example, if I find myself observing the state of anger in the mind, and I understand that the correction for that is loving kindness, then I don't say, may I be filled with loving kindness. This is how the recitation goes, but may I be filled with loving kindness indicates that I have no loving kindness. I've already admitted that to consciousness, that I have no loving kindness. Loving kindness is absent. So I work with, I am filled with loving kindness. And that starts to etch a different road, because I already know I'm not filled with loving kindness because of the anger that I issue forth every day. So I'm just reinforcing that. Still present? Yeah? Okay. Alright, everybody's got a piece of paper, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go in and just observe mind. Just going to close the eyes and watch the inner picture. Not trying to change anything, because that's not mindful. Trying to change something is not being mindful. Mindfulness, another aspect of mindfulness, is just accepting what we find. It's not ours anyway. Thought is not me. Thought is just thought. To validate that, the thoughts that you have, you never say, I'm going to think this. You think it and then you do it, but you don't initiate it by saying, I'm going to think about this and then think about this. Who was not able to encounter a thought or an idea in consciousness? Who did not find one in their mind's presence? So everyone found something, right? And remember the truth of thought not being me. What happens is there's a presence of an idea, thought. We can engage with it by saying either, oh, I like that idea, I think I'll do that, or I don't like that idea, I think I won't do that. That's how we appendix to it, but it is not our idea. We just evaluate it and embrace it. We don't do anything without the motivation of an idea. I've got to go to the bathroom, and then I go. Or not, and I'll have to clean up the floor. But what we're going to do now, does everyone have a pencil or can borrow a pencil from a neighbor? Because what I want you to do is write on your piece of paper the content that you discovered in your consciousness. Okay. Everybody's got that reminder? Now the question about the exercise is, how do I convert my unwholesome thinking, my unwholesome inclinations to wholesome? How do I do what I want to do and not do what I don't want to do? That's the exercise. So the Buddha, in talking to his son Rahula, said, develop meditation on loving kindness. For when you develop meditation on loving kindness, any ill will be abandoned. So again, in this instruction, it gives us cues to how we should word our exercises, even how we should communicate with our consciousness. It didn't say develop the ability to attack and wrestle with and vanquish ill will. It said, just leave that alone. And just concentrate on loving kindness. Don't worry about that. That's going to go away. It doesn't say that, but that is what it is inferred. That's going to go away. In Corinthians, yeah, I'll get it. Practice. It says, resist not evil. Now, some people feel that means if someone is cruel to you, that you should just kind of go, okay, whip me again, mistreat me again. Doesn't mean that. It just means leave that alone. Stick with the good. Don't let that enter your heart. Love them. But don't misunderstand what I'm saying. It doesn't mean stay there and take abuse. It means just don't hate them as you have them escorted out your house. That's all it means. Don't lose your heart. Don't lose your kindness. They can't help what they're doing. If they could, they would. All of us would love, most of us, 98% of us, would love to be acknowledged as good, kind people, wise people, benevolent people. Nobody wants to be the angry aggressor. But we have a lot of angry aggression out there. Rahula, develop meditation on compassion. For when you develop meditation on compassion, any cruelty will be abandoned. Develop meditation on altruistic joy. When you develop meditation on altruistic joy, any discontent will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on equanimity. For when you develop meditation on equanimity, any aversion will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on foulness, for when you develop meditation on foulness, any lust will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on the perception of impermanence, for when you develop meditation on the perception of impermanence, the conceit I am will be abandoned. Okay. Now, does anyone have any questions about how those remedies pertain to what you have on your sheets of paper? Yes.
So as we were having some quiet time, I did some loving kindness, and I have a question about what you started the talk with. Are you suggesting that instead of saying, may I be happy, may I be well, converting that to an affirmation of I am happy, I am well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there are ways that you can construct that. Won't put in the question of mind that says, oh, you're just lying, or you got your fingers crossed behind your back. Right? Most of you here have gone through a guided meditation with me at some time in our relationship, where when we're working with loving kindness, the first thing we do is go back and retrieve a memory of when we felt loved. Okay? Could be anything. Could be puppies, it could be grandma, it could be, anything. First date. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what the experience is in content. What matters is you have labeled that experience as loving. And when you retrieve that experience, you also bring forth with it the feeling. How you felt when you were asked to the prom, how you felt when you were proposed to, how you felt in that aspect of experience, that association with love. Then you drop the experience and capture and contain the feeling, because that's love. That's just pure love. So then when you affirm that I am filled with love, you are absolutely correct and truthful. You are filled with love. Okay? It's important that we support our intention. I spoke on this study that said that 80% of the time, the average individual is unmindful, unheedful. And how do we prop that up? How do we, in our beginning days, in our transitional days, how do we support our desire for mindfulness and correctness and wholesomeness? Well, an expensive way is to buy an app. And they have mindfulness apps where you can hook up to your devices, and everybody here but me has a device. But you can hook up with it, and whatever you program into it, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every 2 minutes, you'll get a little chime that reminds you to take that breath and be mindful. Be here, be present. So that's one way. That's the expensive way. That's the Apple way. But the old-fashioned way is to leave yourself a note. Put a note on the fridge. Put a note on the medicine cabinet. Put a note on your bedroom door. Put a note on your headboard. The places that you go to frequently. And as you go there, you'll find a note. Be mindful. Be loving. Be kind. The more I think about a thing, the more I bring it into my reality. the more I plant the neural pathway. And before I know it, I will find myself unconsciously reaching for that essence without having to think about it, without having to coax myself into going this way instead of that way, without having that battle between the demon on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder. How many here at one time used to smoke cigarettes? All right. Do you remember lighting up a cigarette and then looking in the ashtray and finding one right there? Already smoking? The habit is what happens almost without any consciousness to it at all. It's like we just glide right into our habit. Our anger, our cruelty, our fear, we just kind of slip right into it. With nothing but ease, and we think that means that must be who we are, and it isn't who you are, it's just what you've been doing for the last 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 years. And it's easy. Remember, a habit is the thing that we do most often. That's why it becomes a habit. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to encourage it. It just happens. So one of the things that wasn't talked about in this sutta to the Buddha's son Rahula was fear. I didn't talk about fear. But if you have fear on your paper, the antidote to fear is present moment awareness. Because what is fear? Fear is the feeling of not knowing. That there might be something waiting for me unpleasant in the next moment. But I'm thinking about it in this moment. Which means I am not being present because I am in the next moment consciously. Yes.
I had listened to what you said last week, your talk. I listened to it before school one day. And I'm glad that we're continuing this conversation because what I recognize about myself is when I'm hiking, even with all the physical disorders that I have, I'm working now on not just accepting, but forgiving my body and myself for the place that I probably helped put it in. But in the heat of the moment when I'm not in a place of calm, I still find it hard to hit that moment of not being overwhelmed. I don't have a smartphone either, so it's not like I'm going to have an app that tells me, hey, come back. But in that moment where it's not a conscious awareness of be calm, be still, be intentional, do you have any idea? I get the idea that come back to the present, come back to loving kindness, come back to peace, but when everything is just happening at once and that moment comes where you're not even present enough to realize I need to be present. I mean, I have like my glide bracelet, I have my little rubber bands, when you forget all of those things. Just the ability to turn it off and go, yield.
Well, remember you might be asking too much of yourself at that time too. What I mean by that is, we're talking about reducing and eliminating the habits that hurt us, the habits that bring us pain, the habits that bring others pain. And perhaps the kindness of relationship with that would be to say, oh, there it is again. With the knowingness that that simply means one thing: I've got to practice more. And that intention to practice more will then usher you into a different state of consciousness. Whereas opposed to you being in condemnation and in judgment for where you find yourself, that you will be in a place of workout, if you will, that doesn't give you time to judge and feel sorry for and feel abandoned by something, but you are then engaged in something that's very positive, that you are practicing, that you are reminding yourself that I have to do more of this because it catches me when I don't. Okay? So, but don't be don't be aggravated by it.
I wouldn't even say that I'm aggravated by myself in that moment, because at the moment I'm just kind of in this place of, I have children and adults that are relying on me in a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And when you kind of are like, okay, I can feel the chaos building between the children and the adults, the inability to sometimes even have that moment to step back. There are times you can, and there are times you can't, that you can just go, okay, calm, ease, endure, and reflect back. And sometimes that's what I'm looking for, is when it's so quickly happening that until I have that moment of reflection of intention, which is when I go home and hit my yoga mat, in that moment when is it even okay just to go, I recognize that I have kids and adults right now that are just spooling it up. Okay. When it's that kind of like, that brevity second of, I'm kind of being walled in by what's surrounding me, versus how present and much gain. I'm not agitated with myself for feeling that or disappointed. I don't judge it. I am recognizing that there are times that I'm just kind of like, wow, I'm not as chill as I'd like to be in this second. And I don't know how to regain that chill when everybody else around is kind of going, we're leaning on you, we're leaning.
Try this. Remind yourself that what we are talking about as far as the development of consciousness and the development of states of wholesomeness within consciousness, in our evaluation of the moment, we always should remember that it isn't always going to go the way that I would like it to go, or the way that it would indicate success on my part. That sometimes things are going to work out well for everyone in the moment, and sometimes they're not. And to have that levelness, that okayness about the fact that it's going this way, and that I evaluate or I observe the seeds that I have cast on this moment. Could I have done it any differently? And I say no. And then I let it be. Because I realize that that too is going to change. And it's not going to stay the way forever. You know that. You know, people jump up and down for a moment, and then the next thing you know, they're okay with each other, and I'm all riled up. You know. So we learn, one of the things that is observed through heedfulness and mindfulness is that things come and go. We become first-hand observers of impermanence. And as it says in Scripture, this too shall pass. But in our practice, we work more with equanimity, which means we realize that some good is coming our way, maybe some not so good is coming our way. And that's just a part of reality. That's a part of living in this reality. It's like understanding and acknowledging that death is just another experience of life, that it just happens. It's not a punishment for living, it's just another expression. Yeah. So, all right, everyone's got their antidote on their paper? Oh, I'm sorry, there's a question back there.
Sort of like a, extension of what Dana was talking about. I just came back yesterday for the 9-day trip, 4 days in Manhattan and 5 days in Philadelphia. The idea was I just wanted to be in the present moment, practice in the city. And what I noticed is that I couldn't believe that practice. And I think that when I first started to notice, okay, I got to learn this mindfulness and practice, which was 12 years ago. And it was just horrible. I just gave up, but I still constantly, I'm just going to practice. And then last 2.5 years coming to Hermitage, I'm really practicing, surrendering and all that. But I noticed that incredible relaxation and sort of like a giddy, or just as if I'm watching what I'm doing. I'm just becoming a best friend of mine to see how I am in the present moment, and then just constantly. So what I realize is that we just can't evaluate anything, but all we can do is just keep practicing. And then suddenly we have a change and a shift.
Yeah.
So I think that even thinking about, am I in a good practice, or these things are just a noise.
Well, I do think, though, that we have a process of evaluation. And that process is, am I suffering? Or am I not suffering?
Right? Sure, that I guess.
Okay,
it was like
that's it.
Pleasantness, and I was like, there was so many things constantly happening in a trip. Mm-hmm. You snow and you miss this, miss that. But one thing I noticed is that being in a present moment, nothing really frustrating, because there's next moment to watch.
Right.
The next moment to watch. And then all at the end, it just work it out in some way. It's not my own design, right. But something else is coming. So I'm not so much about evaluating my power, because I'm not really doing it.
Right.
I'm just in the part of the process of each one thought, one action, one thought, one action, and just watching it.
Right.
And so, yeah, you're right about the pleasantness and the relaxation. That is the...
All right, thank you.
Is it kind of like when you have a habit and then you get over that habit and then you never want to go back to it again because the feeling is just so awful? So the same thing with like love and not loving, not having that. Like if you go back to that, you just feel uncomfortable. But when you're in that space where it's like a love space, it just feels so good.
It could be.
So it's like you're teaching yourself in a way. I mean, it's an ongoing thing.
Well,
always going to be.
Remember, suffering is feedback. It's how we coexist with and decide what karma we want to experience. So that's it's just a validation. Suffering and non-suffering is just a validation of karma and our actions. So it's just a way of magic. It's just, you say, oh, the world is terrible and I'm suffering. How do I make it disappear? And by converting and changing the way I relate and see things, being awake to things as they are and not how I think they are, not being in delusion, I become disenchanted with. And again, I love that word because that's a fairy tale word. When all of our children's books talk about enchantment, and I no longer am enchanted by the delusion of the reality. And I find that all of the suffering, all of the fear, all of the anger, all of those expressions disappear. And I'm in a place of peace, a place of stillness, no longer fighting things and people and objects, no longer have complaints. So this is what you come to. This is how you know how your work is proceeding, how your practice is coming along. Okay. So, put your notes up on the fridge, get your apps if that's what you do, and see how it works for you. May all beings be free from suffering. May we be well. May we be happy. May we be peaceful. Thank you so much for everything you do and your support. And have a pleasant day out there today. Smile at a stranger. And we'll see you when we see you.